words of mine can adequately convey the horror of that revelation. 70 feet across it stood, a milky, swirling nebula contained within a living, organic socket that might have been the cranial cavity of some titan from before the dawn of terrestrial life. The socket was composed of the same obsidian as the walls, but it was veined with pulsing channels of a luminescent ichor that cast a pale, sickly light throughout the chamber. And above the eye, a lid of that same obsidian hung suspended, partially retracted, as though the deity within had been roused from an eons-long slumber, but had not yet fully awakened. Thorn did not hesitate. He strode forward with his crowbar raised, driven by an avarice and a scholarly hunger that had obliterated whatever caution he might once have possessed.
"The vital ether!"
he shouted.
"It must be contained within. Help me, Vane. Help me pry back the lid."
I tried to stop him. I swear upon whatever remains of my immortal soul that I tried. But Abbas's hand fell upon my shoulder with a grip that seemed to paralyze my very will, and I could only watch as Thorn struck the obsidian lid with the iron of his crowbar. The sound that resulted was like nothing I had ever heard, a deep, resonant boom that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of reality, followed by a high, keening wail that I felt rather than heard, a vibration that penetrated my skull and set every nerve ablaze. The obsidian lid began to move. It slid upward with a wet, sliding gasp, ascending into a recess in the chamber's ceiling that had not been visible before. And as it rose, the eye beneath it was revealed in all its incomprehensible glory. It was a 40-foot globe of shifting, iridescent vapors, a cauldron of stars that swirled and coalesced and dispersed in patterns that suggested meaning without ever resolving into comprehensibility. At times, it seemed to contain entire galaxies, vast spiral arms of light rotating in stately procession. At others, it compressed into a point of such intense luminosity that I had to shield my face or risk blindness. And it watched. It watched not as a man watches, with focus and intention, but as the cosmos watches, indifferently, eternally, taking in all things with a gaze that had observed the birth and death of 1,000,000 civilizations and found them all equally insignificant. Thorn did not scream. His mind simply unraveled, unspooling like a ball of yarn in the paws of some cosmic cat. I saw his eyes widen, saw them fill with the reflected light of that awful orb, and then I saw them change. The irises lost their color, bleaching to a milky white that was shot through with flecks of starlight, and his mouth fell open in an expression of perfect, beatific horror. He stood transfixed before the eye for what might have been seconds or centuries, and then he crumpled to the obsidian floor like a marionette whose strings had been severed. Abbas stepped from the shadows then, and as he moved into the light of the eye, his form began to warp and shift in ways that violated every law of anatomy and perspective. His limbs elongated, his face stretched, and his two wide eyes blazed with a light that was the color of nothing, a color that existed outside the spectrum visible to human perception. He was no longer a man, if indeed he had ever been one. He was a messenger, an avatar, a speaking piece for powers that dwelt in the spaces between the stars.
"You have done well, Sapper,"
he said, and his voice was no longer the lilting drone of the Egyptian dragoman, but a chorus of whispers that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once.
"The eye is open. The gate is prepared. But the eye hungers, and its sight must be fed."
He spoke into the chambers of my brain then, bypassing my ears entirely and inscribing his words directly upon the tissue of my consciousness. He showed me visions of Clara restored, Clara whole and hale, her cheeks flushed with color, her eyes bright with life. He showed me a world where death was but a forgotten word, where the limitations of mortality had been transcended through congress with the things that dwell beyond the threshold. And he told me what I must do to make these visions real.
"There is a substance,"
he said,
"that the old ones called Tulu metal, though in your tongue it might be rendered as liquid gold. It is the fuel that feeds the eye's sight, the medium through which its gaze may pierce the membranes between realms. Without it, the eye sees only shadows. With it, the eye sees all, past, present, and the infinite branching futures that spiral outward from each moment of decision."
"Where?" I asked, and my voice was a croak, a whisper, the last exhalation of the rational man I had once been. Abbas smiled, and in that smile, I saw the curve of non-Euclidean geometries, the arc of trajectories that led to destinations no sane mind could contemplate.
"Go west, Sapper,"
he hissed.
"to the territories men now claim and name, to a land they call Oklahoma, though it bore other names when the world was young. There, beneath a red hill, the tribes have shunned since memory began, lies the Mound of the Immortals. There you will find the city of Tsath, and there you will find the gold."
He pressed something into my hand, a stone of some vitreous black substance, warm to the touch, pulsing with the same rhythm as the door through which we had passed. Upon its surface were carved coordinates in a notation no earthly civilization had ever employed, and yet I understood them perfectly, as though the knowledge had been set directly into my mind.
"This is your compass,"
Abbas said.
It will guide you through the spaces between. Hold it fast. Think upon the destination. Then step forward into the fold.
I looked down at the stone, then back at Abbas, or at the thing that wore Abbas's face. "And Clara?" I asked. "You swear she will be saved?"
The eye sees all futures, Sapper,
came the reply. And this time the voice seemed to issue from the very stones around us, from the obsidian walls and the pulsing globe that loomed behind.
Bring the gold, and the future you desire shall be made manifest. This is the covenant. This is the price.
The passage did not leave me alone. In the first moment after the wrenching transit, before place or sky had resolved themselves, I became aware of the cat. It crouched beside me upon the alien ground, untroubled, its eyes reflecting no alarm at the violation we had just endured. I cannot say when it came to me. I know only that it had appeared one day while I oversaw the excavation at Giza, and that from that hour it had remained, following without summons, departing without farewell, yet always returning. That it should have crossed the void with me did not, upon reflection, seem strange. I felt no irritation at its presence, only a quiet satisfaction, for companionship, however slight, has its own consolations when reason begins to fray. The transition itself had been a violent sundering and reconstitution of my substance, a sensation not of motion but of being distributed, drawn out across gulfs no mortal frame was intended to span. Abbas's forbidden coordinates guided the passage, glyphs he had traced upon my flesh with a stylus of crystallized radiance, burning themselves into me with a chill more profound than fire. In an instant that contained uncounted ages, I was borne from the buried chambers of Egypt to a solitary, red-dusted hill in the Western territories men now claim. Though no interval of time had elapsed, I endured within that instant the lighting and extinguishing of suns, the cooling of worlds, and the first blind stirrings of life in primordial seas, all crushed into a single, intolerable moment of dislocation. I found myself standing upon the summit of the mound as the sun declined, staining the heavens with crimsons and tarnished golds that seemed, in that hour, unbearably beautiful. The land stretched outward in featureless immensity, clothed in coarse prairie grasses that stirred in a wind I did not feel. Far off, a lone homestead broke the horizon, mute testimony to some settler's defiance of isolation and scale. Yet my gaze was drawn irresistibly downward, to the hill beneath my boots, to the unsettling regularity of its contours, too deliberate for chance, and to the faint, thrumming vibration that rose from unseen depths below, felt more keenly in the bones than in the ear. Abbas had told me that the native tribes had shunned this place since memory's beginning, and now I knew the wisdom of that ancient avoidance. The wrongness here exceeded mere distortion of rock and soil. It carried the impression of sickness, as though the earth itself had been invaded by a deep and patient corruption, slowly insinuating itself through the foundations of the land. The grasses upon the mound were pallid and withered despite the rains that had left the surrounding prairie green, and the few trees clinging to its lower slopes were contorted into postures suggestive of suffering rather than growth. No insect voiced its presence. I stood in a silence so complete it pressed upon the senses, a hush unbroken by wing, chirr, or breath, as though life itself had learned long ago to keep its distance. I had come prepared. In my satchel, I carried a custom-built diving suit of brass and leather, designed according to specifications that Abbas had inscribed upon my memory. It was a curious apparatus, fitted with filters and regulators that were unlike anything employed by the deep-sea divers of my acquaintance, and equipped with reservoirs of compressed gas that Abbas assured me would sustain my respiration in the alien atmosphere I was about to enter. I donned this suit with the methodical precision of a condemned man preparing for the gallows, checking each seal and valve with the care of one who knows that the slightest error will mean oblivion. The entrance to the mound was concealed beneath a slab of native stone that appeared, to casual inspection, to be merely a natural outcropping. But when I approached it and spoke the words that Abbas had taught me, words in a language that predated human speech, that seemed to vibrate in frequencies inaudible to normal hearing, the slab shimmered and faded, revealing a shaft that descended into absolute darkness. I activated the chemical lamp affixed to my helmet, took a final breath of the clean prairie air, and began my descent. I did not know whether the cat would follow me down or not. Creatures such as these are said to possess a finer sense for unseen peril than men, and I half expected that instinct to halt it at the threshold. Yet when I turned, I saw that it had already crossed the slab and now sat at the lip of the opening, its eyes fixed upon me with that calm, unwinking attention I had come to know so well. It followed. From this I reasoned, dimly and without the former clarity of mind I might once have possessed, that the air below must be breathable, or at least not immediately hostile to life. And this, in turn, raised a question that arrived too late and with too little force to detain me. Why Abbas, or the thing that wore Abbas's form, had insisted upon this particular suit at all? Yet the thought did not linger. My mind, once trained to weigh atmospheres and stresses and tolerances, was no longer governed by such habits. Clara filled it utterly. She had filled it since Egypt, since the first dreadful days beneath the sands of Giza, where I had seen too much to remain the man I had been. Calculation had given way to fixation. Caution had been devoured by purpose. I moved down the shaft, and the cat did not hesitate.